Out of Gaza, several rockets have been fired from the besieged Palestinian enclave towards Israel. There are warning sirens being sounded in and around Gaza, as well as central and southern Israel. Let's get back to Yumna Al-Said, who's joining us on the line from Gaza. So, Yumna, give us more information about the latest situation, if you would, please.
Well, Nick, until now, the barrages of rockets are still being launched from different areas of the Gaza Strip. The launching has not stopped. Also, the Iron Dome keeps on launching the intercepting rockets. The only significant thing that we have now is by Al-Qassam Brigade, that's the military wing of Hamas, saying that there is an urgent statement that is going to be delivered shortly by the chief of staff of Al-Qassam Brigade, that's Mohammed Al-Daif. And now this is something that is very, very important in the scene, because we rarely get any statement from Al-Daif in particular, and that is the highest head of Al-Qassam Brigade, the military wing of Hamas. So we are waiting for that statement, which will or could be the ultimate explanation to what has been happening this past hour.
Yumna, just fill us in from the beginning. Were you awoken to this going on, to the sirens going off? Take us through it.
Well, the sirens are still going on in different Israeli towns. According to Israeli military, they said that the range of rockets that have been fired from Gaza have reached until Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem. So this means that the range of the rockets that are being used are a very high range of rockets. The barrages of rockets that are being launched from Gaza, the short-range rockets towards the Israeli towns, are still going on from different areas. We have armed confrontations between military fighting groups in Gaza and the Israeli troops deployed on the borders in the central part and the southern part of Gaza Strip, in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah.
We're hearing that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's due to convene top security officials in the coming hours following these rocket barrages. And that's the thing now, is what the Israeli response will be.
Exactly. And also, now we're waiting for two major statements, Benjamin Netanyahu statement and Mohammed al-Daif statement. And this will be the explanation of also what is going to happen, the further development of these coming hours. Now, this crazy launching of rockets that has been going on for almost an hour now still does not show us what the coming period will hold. Of course, in Gaza, everything has been suspended. Excuse me. Educational institutions, businesses, private and governmental sectors. There were announcements that everything is going to be shut today for these urgent circumstances and situations until we have a further clarification of what is happening.
Yumna, just give us the context of this, of events in recent months, how tensions have been building up.
It surely has been a very tenseful or a month full of tensions. This previous weeks have witnessed a lot of Israeli-Palestinian confrontations, a lot of provocations when it comes to Al-Aqsa Mosque and the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Aqsa compound by ultra-Orthodox Jewish settlers in the Jewish holidays, the prevention of the Palestinian worshippers from going to Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the allowing of these settlers to storm Al-Aqsa. And also the violence by the Israeli forces towards the worshippers in Al-Aqsa Mosque and Al-Aqsa compound. Now, all these provocations have led to a lot of confrontations the past weeks on the borders of the Gaza-Israeli borders, along the Gaza Strip. And these confrontations, they were very violent confrontations, protests. They witnessed a lot of shooting, a lot of incendiary balloons sent from Gaza, a lot of responding by the Israeli forces. Many times, the Palestinian fighting groups have announced that they are losing patience towards these provocations. They're calling the Israeli government to stop right away these provocations. And we've seen Al-Aqsa compound, Al-Aqsa mosque, flare up a lot of escalations before between the Palestinian fighting groups in Gaza and Israel. So this isn't a first, but the ongoing provocations, the last period of time have really enhanced the situation between both sides.
Yumna, we're looking as we speak at pictures coming out of Ashkelon. We can see what looks like a series of cars ablaze and black smoke billowing into the air from the street. Tell us about the potential range of the rockets and which areas are generally targeted when this happens, and how close Ashkelon in this case is.
Usually Ashkelon is the town that is in the southern of Israel, which is the closest to the Palestinian-Israeli border. So when we're talking about rockets going to Ashkelon, we're talking about the southern towns of Israel. They're just the short-range rockets. These are short-range rockets going to that area. But what is really significant is Israeli army spokesman talking about rockets falling up to Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem. And that means that these are very high-range rockets that are rarely being used. As you can hear, this is a rocket that has just launched in front of me as we're speaking. Now, as I was saying, Nick, when we're talking about these border towns, these are towns that are adjacent to the Israeli-Gaza border. These are the closest towns to any rocket fire from Gaza.
There's a constant flow of arms and weapons into Gaza, which is the Israelis make continual efforts to try and stem that flow. Tell us a little bit about that and what happens with the smuggling in of these rockets and how something like this can happen when there's such an effort made by the Israelis to try and prevent it from happening.
Well, Nick, the rockets that are being launched from Gaza are locally made in Gaza. They're mostly locally made in Gaza. And in the ceremonies of these military groups or factions in Gaza, these ceremonies are made to actually showcase the new rockets that they have been able to manufacture locally here in Gaza in a proud way to say. So about any ways of smuggling rockets into Gaza, as far as we know, all the borders or Gaza being under stifling Israeli siege, the borders totally being closed, even the materials that are being entering or are allowed to enter Gaza, there's a scarcity of materials that are being allowed to enter Gaza. Even construction materials, they only enter for the United Nations or under the authority of the United Nations or very private groups or sectors that are also coordinated using the UN permission. So it's very difficult to get into material to Gaza to but even though these rockets that we see here are, as they say proudly, locally manufactured by Palestinian Gazan hands.
You say we're waiting for a statement from the Al-Qassam brigades, an emergency statement from the Chief of Staff. Would they be the only group involved in this?
Well, I we can't really say or be sure if they're going to be the only group that is involved in this or not. But as far as we know from how things have usually developed in the past, when it's Hamas, Hamas is the largest military and it's the governing group here in the Gaza Strip. And originally, when Hamas is into a war with Israel, all other Palestinian factions are joining hands with Hamas and joining that war. So it's very difficult to say that if Hamas is going to be confronting Israel, it's going to be Hamas alone.
Give us a sense of how people will be waking up this morning in Gaza and the sense of resignation or otherwise, or determination to fight. I don't know. Tell me, when something like this happens, what will people be feeling when, now they're aware of what's going on?
Well, for Gaza, it was actually a very we woke up on very frightening sounds. As someone who lives in Gaza, I woke up on the sounds of rockets, barrages of rockets being fired. I said before, when we have firing rockets from Gaza, rockets being launched from Gaza, we can see them in our skies. We can see the rockets being fired above our heads. And that's because of how small the Gaza Strip is. And they're firing from the Gaza Strip. So we literally see all the barrages of rockets going right there above our heads. The sound, the smoke covering the skies of Gaza. All these are very scary and frightening scenes and noises to the residents of Gaza. I mean, everyone instantly woke to the sound, waking up to a shock of what is happening. It was very calm last night. People slept calmly without really expecting anything this big to happen. Now, of course, the ongoing feeling in the Gaza Strip for residents, when there is any escalation or just a firing of rockets, they're always afraid that this would flare a larger escalation or erupt a larger war. The conditions in the Gaza Strip are not stable for the population. There are already people who are hardly living under an ongoing Israeli blockade for over 16 years now. So the amount of fear, the amount of tension, the amount of worry among the people is very high, especially that Gaza is not an area or place in the world where they can actually decide to pack and leave until things get calmer. No, people here cannot leave when they want to. They cannot travel at any time when they decide to, like other areas around the world. And so that's why there's always a great amount of fear of what is going to happen next, what is happening now. But if you ask people in the streets, they will tell you, we definitely do not want to leave another war. We definitely haven't gathered what we have lost in previous wars and escalations just to return to a new one now.
And, when something like this happens, as you say, people will be very nervous about the Israeli response. What preparations are people making right now? Because it will be coming, won't it?
Well, it was the whole thing started very early in the morning. So basically, shops and supermarkets and other had not yet even opened their doors. Maybe just bakeries in Gaza. People were ready to go to schools, especially that UNRWA schools start very early in the morning. And basically, since there was a neutral call among all sectors that everything is shut in Gaza, now people are just remaining home. In such conditions, we know that they ask supermarkets in the local areas, to open up for a couple of hours. But this is where the problem happens, because everyone wants to supply as much as they can so that if things get worse, if things get more complicated, they have the essential food supplies in their homes. And this is where actually the crisis happened, the shortage of food supplies in the Strip for the population.
Yumna, just hang on there. I'm just going to quickly recap what we're looking at, what we've been hearing. A barrage of rockets is being fired from the besieged Palestinian enclave of Gaza towards Israel. Warning sirens have been sounded in and around Gaza, as well as central and southern Israel. Yumna, who we're speaking to now, has been talking about how she's never seen such an amount of rockets being fired at the same time, and they're still being launched. We were hearing it as she was speaking just now, a rocket being fired overhead. No statement as yet as to what's happening, but we are expecting to hear from the Al-Qassam Brigade. The Chief of Staff is due to speak soon, and Yumna was telling us that is noteworthy because we rarely get statements from them at this kind of situation. We've also been looking at pictures of Ashkelon, where we can see a line of cars ablaze and black smoke billowing up into the air, which you can see in the corner of the screen there. Ashkelon is the closest town to the Israeli border on the Israeli side, and it would have been short-range rockets that would have caused that damage there, but also there are reports of long-range rockets going as far as West Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. So, Yumna, once again, just recap for us your experience this morning, what you woke to, and what's going on.
We woke up this morning about an hour ago on the sound of the barrages of rockets that were being fired from the Gaza Strip from different areas at the same time, all across the Gaza Strip. Not just rockets, but barrages of rockets, high-range rockets and short-range rockets. According to the Israeli army, the high-range rockets have reached until Tel Aviv and West Jerusalem, and these rockets are not always used, or rarely are being used here from the Gaza Strip towards Israel, only when it really gets complicated between Israel and the Palestinian fighting groups. Until now, the barrages are still being launched from Gaza Strip. We can see the Iron Dome rockets in the Gaza skies intercepting those rocket launches. Also, eyewitnesses have said that Palestinian fighting groups men have crossed the other side to the Israeli-Palestinian border in the central part in Deir el-Balah and in Khan Yunis in the western part of Gaza Strip, and had armed confrontations with the Israeli soldiers deployed along those two borders. Until now, we're still waiting for two major statements by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Chief of Staff of Al-Qassam Brigade, Mohammed al-Zayf, to witness or to understand what is actually going on.
All right, Yumna, back with you shortly. Thanks for that. In the meantime, let's cross to Sarah Harrett now, who's joining us from occupied East Jerusalem. Sarah, what are you hearing from the Israeli side of things? I understand that Benjamin Netanyahu to convene top security officials in the coming hours.
That's right. Well, there's actually been no immediate statement from Israel, but usually what would happen is, and that's what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, that they will convene a top security official. These will be very high up people in his military. And usually when this kind of scenario happens, the Israeli military response is hard, and that means airstrikes. We've seen that. Saw that a few months ago, earlier this year, when they targeted the Qassam Brigade members, top officials, that's usually the kind of scenario and the direction that they would take. Now, what we know is that these rockets have been launched, and they've even reached as far as air raids being heard as far as Tel Aviv, about 70 kilometers away from Gaza, as well as several locations. You have Sidi Boker, Arad, Dimona. Now, all these locations are as far as in the south of Israel. It's quite poignant because at the moment this is the last day of the Sukkot holiday. It's one of the major Jewish holidays, and this has been a week-long holiday that's been taking place here in Israel. And one can't help but think about how just yesterday it was the 50-year anniversary of the 1973 war, which was on Yom Kippur Day, which is one of the most solemn days in the Jewish calendar, where Israel was completely side-blinded, shocked, and even confused when they were attacked by neighboring Egypt as well as Syria, and that lasted 3 months. So, this is a holiday where Jews would completely least expect such a thing to happen. But tensions have been extremely high this year, with the largest number of Palestinian deaths in decades. We've seen more than 250 Palestinians that have been killed just in occupied territories. Of course, those occupied territories include the West Bank and East Jerusalem as well. And we've been seeing an increase by the Israeli side on Palestinians in terms of home demolitions, raids. I mean, this has become a daily thing that Palestinians are dealing with. Their homes are being demolished because they may have happen to know an armed Palestinian that may have carried out an attempted attack on Israelis rather. Things have been extremely tense in occupied West Bank, especially just in the last 3 days. We've seen a major escalation of tensions in Hawara, where a Palestinian attempted to attack an Israeli family at close gunpoint range, and that resulted in the injury of several Israeli soldiers as well. So things have been very, very tense this year, especially under an extremely hardline part of the government where you have the Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's the national security minister, Israel's national security minister, who has for many months been telling Israelis to be armed, to supposedly protect themselves against Palestinian attacks. But we're also seeing an increase in armed groups, especially in places like Jenin refugee camp in occupied West Bank, which has become a flashpoint of tensions. Overnight, we saw the Palestinian Authority entering an area in occupied West Bank, and clashes happen there as well. So things have been extremely tense in this last few days here in Israel.
And Sarah, it's a seemingly endless cycle, isn't it? These things flare up frequently. Rockets are fired out of Gaza. The Israel response comes. It's hard, usually, as you say, with air raids and so forth. And so it goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And usually when things escalate to this level, eventually there ends up being some sort of negotiations where Egypt, for example, may weigh in or try to hold talks or try to calm the situation. Of course, this comes at a time when Israel is really pushing for the normalization of relations with Arab countries, and that has been happening. And look, we're looking at, for example, Saudi Arabia, that's been carrying out a lot of changes in the country. It's opening up. It wants to become more westernized. It's trying to bring more tourists. It's trying to move its economy away from oil and open up. And one of those ways is it looks like it may be heading towards normalizing relations with Israel. Israel has very much been keen to do this and has been pushing this through the help of its longest ally, the U.S., and especially someone, for example, like U.S. President Joe Biden. He has been wanting to leave that as part of his legacy. We've been seeing a huge change, and just yesterday, when we were talking about the 50-year anniversary, we've seen huge changes in the Arab world when it comes to its relationship with Israel. A few years ago, it would have been unthinkable to normalize relations with Israel. The Palestinian cause has been very much integral to the politics of this region, to uniting this region, despite any other disagreements between Arab countries. The one thing that united them was the Palestinian cause. And we're increasingly seeing that these countries are turning towards Israel for relations, such as the UAE, for example, that has opened up to Israel for business. You also have natural gas in the Gaza area, and for example, that there is interest from other Arab countries to see what they can do with that. So you're seeing these changes, and we've seen it definitely in the last 50 years since October 6th war, for example, and that just kind of emboldens Israel, if you like. And meanwhile, Palestinians are feeling that they have been forgotten. This idea of a two-state solution, many are questioning whether that could ever happen, whether it will ever materialize, despite on the surface, leaders, Palestinian leaders or Israeli leaders or, the U.S. administration saying that they are trying to push for a two-state solution.
Sarah, Benjamin Netanyahu said that he will convene a meeting of senior officials of the security ministers in the next few hours. What normally happens in the situation? Would we expect to hear from him, or is a response likely just to happen?
He doesn't always give immediate responses. Usually we may hear, we usually will just hear when that there's been airstrikes. Yeah. But he had, I think, on such a major incident at a time when he'd been scrambling to come back as prime minister. He's been the longest serving prime minister in Israel's short history. He needed a coalition government to be able to come back to power, despite an investigation into and a trial he's waiting for. But the only way he could come back to power was with this coalition, as a coalition government with a hardline, ultra right-wing members such as Itamar Ben-Gvir or Smotrich, that is increasingly pushing for and openly pushing for the expansion of illegal Israeli settlements in occupied West Bank, and it's further squeezing the Palestinians in more ways than one. So, he may come out and with a statement, but at the moment there's been absolutely no immediate response to the situation. But it's very likely we could see Israeli airstrikes on Gaza.
And sorry, information is pretty sketchy at the moment. More and more is coming through to us. There are a couple of lines dropping about the Israeli military saying it has preliminary reports of infiltrations by Palestinian gunmen from Gaza across the border. And this was something that Yumna was alluding to a little bit earlier. When these barrages come over from Gaza, is it typical that there would be infiltrations at the same time?
Not usually. I think this seems to be quite unprecedented. We have seen a video that looks like the infiltration that you're talking about of fighters on Jewish rooftops. I mean, this is major. For this to happen, this could potentially lead to a major war. But we're just going to have to wait and see. But this does not look good at all.
Right, and as we speak, sorry, just hang on there, I'll just recap for our viewers what's happening here. We're looking at pictures of rockets being fired out of Gaza. You can see the contrails streaking across the sky there. Earlier we could see the effects of the Iron Dome as well, which was eliminating rockets as they were coming in. As you look at the screen, in the left-hand corner, you can see pictures of flames and black smoke billowing into the sky. That is from the streets of Ashkelon, which is right on the border with Israel. So short-range rockets coming from Gaza causing that damage there. Several barrages of rockets are being fired from the besieged Palestinian enclave towards Israel. Warning sirens have been sounded in and around Gaza, and as well as central and southern Israel for more than an hour now as this barrage of rockets continues. We are expecting a statement from Al-Qassam brigades, an emergency statement from the Chief of Staff in the coming hours, if not before. So, Sarah, just once again, give us a bit of context to this and why tensions are so high at this moment and what might have led to this.
Yeah, we've seen since the beginning of the year with this new government, there had been several attacks by Palestinians, sometimes lone Palestinians that have attacked Israelis. For example, we covered a Palestinian that rammed into an Israeli family at a bus stop. They killed a few. There was an attack outside a Jewish synagogue. And at the time, Israelis had criticized the government for not acting fast enough. They said that they had managed to kill those Palestinian attackers because by chance it happened to be that some of those Israelis were armed or former police members, so they were able to take down those Palestinian attackers. And at the time, there was a lot of criticism towards the government, saying that more needs to be done. So what we're seeing that has been differently by Palestinian attackers is that there's been a lot more lone wolves, if you like, young Palestinians feeling disillusioned, unable to move around easily. They don't have the rights. Some of the areas that we have covered, including in occupied East Jerusalem, don't even have the necessary services in the areas that they live in, even though those should be provided by the government. So you're seeing this general feeling, especially amongst young male Palestinians who feel that they have no future, especially under a government that seems to be increasingly more hardline against Palestinians and constantly, for example, when it comes to Al-Aqsa Mosque, preventing some Palestinians from entering. There's been a lot of provocation with ultra-Orthodox Jews trying to enter Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, even though they're not allowed, but sort of being allowed in by Israeli security forces around that area. And it's provocative to the Palestinians, especially Muslims, who consider that to be one of their holiest sites in Islam. So tensions are high. You feel it on the streets, the constant checks, especially even here in East Jerusalem, occupied East Jerusalem, where you see them stopping young boys just because they can and checking them. So for a lot of Palestinians, they're feeling that, especially under this current government, there is no hope for them in terms of moving forward and in terms of feeling like they have some form of human rights. There are huge numbers of hunger strikes in Israeli prisons by Palestinian prisoners at the moment who are waiting trial with no date, nothing set in stone. And a lot of that sometimes goes against international human rights, even, for example, the demolition of their homes by association. If you're a family and one of your relatives may have carried out an attack or may have been associated somehow, your home would be demolished, and Palestinians tend to live very close together as families. You might have your parents, your grandparents, and your home is demolished as a result through association. So for a lot of Palestinians, they've felt that day-to-day life has become increasingly harder, and that's where you're seeing, especially in refugee camps in occupied West Bank, a rise in armed Palestinians, because they feel that is the only way they can resist an occupation that continues.
Sarah, thanks for that. Back with you, of course, as things continue here in Gaza. Several barrages of rockets being fired from the besieged Palestinian enclave towards Israel. Warning sirens have been sounding for more than an hour now in and around Gaza, as well as central and southern Israel. We are looking at pictures there in the left-hand corner of Ashkelon. Cars ablaze there on the street and black smoke streaming into the air. Ashkelon, of course, one of the regular targets for rockets coming out of Gaza. It's short-range rockets would have reached there, but also we're hearing rockets reaching as far as West Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. We've been seeing the contrails of rockets firing through going through the sky, and also the puffs of smoke, which is the